Hello all the crazy people out there, my name is Michael, I like wizards and dragons and making games, and welcome to what is probably going to be the third and final video that I make on wireframes in 3D and GameMaker. Other strategies to do this exist. This is probably my favorite one. If you want to see videos that I've made on other ways that you can do wireframes in GameMaker, I'll have links to those videos popping out of the screen right now. This trick is going to rely on barycentric coordinates and shader derivatives, and I've made videos on those two things in the past. If you're not familiar with them, I would suggest that you become familiar with them. I will also have links to those videos popping out of the side of the screen if you would like to click on them. So this 3D demo scene is all set up with the aforementioned barycentric coordinates. If I hit the, I believe I set it to the shift key, the game will draw the barycentric coordinates as like vertex colors. So you can see each vertex in each triangle is indexed red, green, and blue. And that applies to everything in the scene except for the tile map on the floor, because GameMaker tile maps do not give me the freedom to mess with them the way that vertex buffers do.
Hey.
So we're gonna get on with this. Right now, everything in the scene is drawn through the basic 3D stuff shader. That is pretty much what it says on the label. We're really just calculating the fragment lighting in the shader, and we don't really need any of that right now. We're not going to be concerned with that, so I'm just going to comment all this out. If you would like to be fancy when you're following this video along, and perhaps including a toggle to switch between the wireframe view of the 3D scene and the full shaded view, you can do that. I am not going to. I'm going to move that down a little bit. Again, shader derivatives are enabled in GameMaker. At least in GLSL, you have to enable them yourself. It's a bit of a pain. GameMaker's fabled new runtime update should address this, but who knows when that's coming out. The barycentric coordinate is passed to the fragment shader as varying, of course. So I'm going to start out by not actually doing anything with shader derivatives at all, and we're going to build up towards using that. We're going to be writing some maybe less than ideal versions of doing wireframes in GameMaker to begin with, and then we're going to make that progressively better as the video goes along. So let's start out by describing how exactly you can use said barycentric coordinate to figure out if you're on the edge of a triangle, which is, after all, what a wireframe is all about. So, as the barycentric coordinate is interpolated across the surface of a triangle, if it's following an edge, the barycentric coordinate of the vertex that is opposite that edge is always going to have a value of 0. And as such, we could write a very rudimentary shader that says if v_v barycentric, I feel like I didn't spell that right. Apparently I did. That's unusual. If v_v barycentric dot red is, let's say, less than 0.02 as an arbitrary threshold, or, and I'm not going to spell that right 3 times in a row, v_v barycentric dot green is less than 0.02, or v_v barycentric dot blue is less than 0.02. Then we can say gl_frag color. Let's assign this a value of vec4. And what color do we want our wireframe edges to be? Let's make them black. So we can say 0, 0, 0, and 1 with a color black transparency of 1. Else gl_frag color is going to equal vec4. And we can make the filled interior surfaces of each triangle white. So we can make this something like 1, 1, 1, 1, like that. And that can be our entire shader. I believe more modern versions of the OpenGL shader language have functions which you can more easily check to see if any of the components of a vector are less than a particular value, but I don't believe GameMaker shader language is old, and I don't think we can use the any function or the less than function or anything that right now. And so we can see that we have something that does indeed resemble a wireframe here. And possibly most interestingly, this is something that was not available to us in the other two methods of wireframes that I described in the past. You actually have a fair amount of control over the way the wireframe looks when you do this in the shader. So by messing with these values inside whatever's in the vec4 over here, we can control the color of the wireframe right here in the shader. By messing with these values, we can control the thickness of the wireframe. We can blend the wireframe color with the original color of the of whatever we're drawing, and I'll get to some of that later on. But let's see, I've got to hold the shift key down again. This is a very basic way to do wireframes. It does not look great on, for example, small triangles that are far away from the camera. You can see that on the spheres they're getting pretty chopped up pretty quickly as they get farther away. They look much better on these large triangles as I get my face closer to them. And there are ways that we can improve that. So let's go about improving that. First, let me actually make a commit. Basic black and white wireframes. All right. So as for making these look better on triangles that are either small or far away from the camera or both, we can start using our old friend the shader derivatives for this, and we can use the shader derivatives to basically adjust the threshold for drawing the wireframe for the distance from the camera. And the way that we can do that is we can get the rate of change for each fragment being drawn of the value of the barycentric coordinate. So I'm going to start off by saying, let's say vec3, let's say BC width is going to be the F width of the, yeah, let's just copy and paste that. I'm not going to spell it right. Of the barycentric coordinate. So this is going to give us the rate of change of this value for each pixel in each triangle that we're drawing. And I think next I'm going to just write an entire line of code and explain it when I'm done. So let's say vec3, oh, what do I want to call this? I'll call this AA width is going to be equal to smooth step from a vec3 of 0 to a value of BC width times 1.5. And it's going to take a basically a time value, an x value, whatever, of v underscore v barycentric. So one of the things that you may have noticed when I ran the game a minute ago was that the outlines, was that the wireframes on each of the triangles was very jagged. It was not anti-aliased at all. And one of the things that we're going to try and take care of is we're going to try and smooth out that line a little bit. So AA width, that's just going to be a, we're going to use this to anti-alias the line a little bit. Smooth step is a function that is a little bit hard to explain if you're not mathematically inclined. It's basically a fancier version of the lerp function. You can think of smooth step as a fancier version of the lerp function, but instead of a linear interpolation, it is going to, I believe the way that it interpolates between the two values is going to be more of a sigmoid function. If you, again, have a mathematical background, you probably know what that looks like. If you know what a logistic curve looks like, it's sort of the same shape. I'll have a picture on screen right now of how the interpolation for a sigmoid curve is going to look versus just a linear interpolation. The interpolation amount that we're going to use is going to be just v underscore v barycentric. And this should give us a, or at least this should help us get a more anti-aliased value for the wireframe. Lastly, I'm going to declare a float. I'm going to call this edge factor, and that is going to be equal to the min of, and unfortunately the min and max functions in shaders are not overloaded, so you can't simply say AA width dot R AA width dot G AA width dot B. The shader compiler will not like this, so instead we're going to have to use two min functions, and we're just going to have to take the minimum of two values and then use that and min it with the third value. It's a bit annoying, but that's how it goes sometimes. So the edge factor here is going to give us a value that basically is how close to the edge of the triangle we are, how wireframey it should be, and with this value you can either just pop it into an if statement, or we can make use of some lovely linear interpolation. Again, we're going to be first using the smooth step function to get a smooth interpolation. And then we're just going to use the mix function in GLSLES to get a linear interpolation. And that's going to take the form of GL underscore frag color. The RGB is going to be equal to a mix of... What were my original colors? The like the filled part of the triangle was white and the outline was black, right? So I can say vec3 1 to vec3 0, and our edge factor is going to be just that. Our lerp value is going to be the edge factor, and then GL frag color.a is going to just be 1.0. And we have a value that does not look right somewhere. What don't you like, OpenGL? Oh, these compiler errors are so useless sometimes. Let me scroll up in the console to see if, yeah, there's better error messages for shader compilers if you scroll up in the console. I don't know why GameMaker doesn't just like pop them out down here. That would be so much more useful. Oh, that needs to be why is the Barycentric a 4-component float? Why is that a vec4? Oh, because I was using it as literally a color value earlier. Okay. Yeah, alright, fine. If this is just a vec3, then you can just pass it in as its own name, but if it's not a, but if it's a vec4, you're gonna just need to grab the red, green, blue. Alright. So I'm going to hit the, okay, so I guess I reversed it. I'm gonna hit the shift key, and we are going to have we're gonna have a bunch of black surfaces, and we're gonna have white wireframes around them. And we can see that the wireframe looks a lot nicer now. For one, it's not quite as jagged. It's not quite as jagged as it goes up and down the triangles that are close to us, the way that it was before, and more. At least I think this is more of a visual upgrade than what we had before. I don't really mind the aliasing on the thick lines, but triangles that are smaller or triangles that are far away from us still have the same, approximately the same thickness of the wireframes as triangles that are large or close to us. So we don't have the colors of the wireframes of, for example, these spheres with small triangles sort of blending together and becoming awkward and weird. The trees that are far away from us down there, they still have nice visible wireframes that aren't getting smaller or blurry or washed out as we get farther away. At least within like the constraints of the resolution of my screen anyway. Alright, so everything else from this point onwards is just like visual tweaks and ways to customize the wireframe in ways that we really couldn't before. If I unreverse the order of these colors, we're gonna have white filled triangles with black outlines like that. Alright. I think that's a little bit clearer perhaps. If you want to mix the if you want to combine the original like colors that we had that we got from like the textures and the vertex colors and whatever, or at least the are those gone now? Because everything is vertex color in this example. There's no texture. But you could take whatever you get from Texture 2D, GM-based texture, and put that in the destination term of the linear interpolation function, and that would give you a filled color of, oh, screw you, fine, .rgb, whatever. That would give you a filled triangle color of whatever you sampled from the texture. So if you had, I'll find a better example and pop it on screen in post. Nothing in the scene is actually using a texture besides the tile map, and that's not having the wireframe applied to it anyway. Anyway, this is what I do in things like my 3D model converter program and my terrain editor program, so that you can see the wireframe overlaid on top of the textured whatever you were looking at. And that is often more helpful than just having a black and white wireframe. Other ways you can customize this: the thickness of the wireframe. You could customize the thickness of the wireframe by passing in, instead of like this 1.5, which is if you wanted to make this, for example, something like, let's say 4.0 instead, the wireframe is going to be much thicker. This is something that you might pass in. See, now they're really thick. The spheres down here, if you're more than a few meters away, they're pretty much solidly black. This is the sort of thing that you might consider passing in as a uniform to the shader. I'm not going to do that right now. You all know how uniforms work, but this is going to give us a much thicker wireframe. Let's dial that back down to 1.5, shall we? If you want to only have the wireframe, like the final wireframe color, blended a little bit with whatever the original color is, like this. And again, this is going to be something that's not really visible in this example, but I will throw something on screen in post to show maybe a better example of it. You can multiply the edge factor by something like 0.5, and then the wireframe will be a little bit it'll come out looking like the wireframe only has like semi-transparency on top of whatever you're drawing. So in this case, it's just going to be like all right, let's actually back up a few steps. Would it be more intuitive if I like switched this around and went from the source color to the wireframe color, and then instead of having like edge factor be that, we can say edge factor is going to be equal to 1.0 minus the edge factor. That's going to give us the same result, right? All right, so white fill and black wireframe, and from here I should be able to more intuitively. What do you want? Missed a multiplication sign. All right, so now we're gonna have a white fill and a only partially like colorized black wireframe. You might find this to be a somewhat more useful way to represent wireframes than to have something that's like pure black or pure whatever color that you wanna do this with. On that note, if you want to customize the color of the wireframe, and you know what? Let me actually separate these all out from magic numbers. We can say float wire thickness is going to be equal to, I'm going to set that to 1.5, and we're going to just drop that in there as a value like that. Over here, this can be wire, let's call it wire alpha, basically. Float wire alpha is going to be equal to 0.5. And lastly, there's going to be vec3 wire color. Right now, that is simply vec3 of 0. But if we wanted to make it something like, let's say, for example, red, this could be 1, 0, 0. So we're going to have a red wireframe, 50% red wireframe here. I guess that would be rather pinkish when it's blended with white like that. And you can customize the wireframe color like that. Okay. Lastly, something that I've done in the past is attenuate, basically attenuate the wireframe alpha with distance from the camera. I don't know if I want to get into that right now. How long has this video been going on? I've been recording for a half an hour. All right, fine, let's do it. So if I were to just get a basic varying float v underscore distance from camera, and if I were to assign this a value that's something like GM matrices matrix world view times the input position dot z, and that's going to give us the unscaled distance from the camera. And if I were to pass that in as a varying over here, and before I spend 15 minutes embarrassing myself, that needs to be matrix world view. I'm totally being proactive about that typo, and I totally didn't just spend 5 minutes trying to figure out why the next code that I wrote didn't work. We can take the wire alpha, divide that by the v underscore distance from the camera. This divided by the wire fade out distance, so fragments that are farther away are going to be have a weaker wireframe alpha. And lastly, wire alpha should probably be clamped between 0.0 and 1.0. Otherwise, you don't want things that are very close to be very bright. And we can now see that the wireframes are fading into the distance. So things that are far away are having their wireframes being dimmed. If I were to get very far away, you would see them disappear entirely. So we now have wireframes in GameMaker in 3D using shader derivatives and barycentric coordinates. Obligatory mention that it's generally customary to make these values uniforms for the shader. I mentioned that before, and this entire section of code, just make this like a function so that you can just call it whenever, and you can organize your code a little bit better than this. I have seen people who follow these videos to make their own games, sometimes occasionally just like blobbing everything down in the main function like I'm doing here. But it's generally a good code organization practice to put stuff like this in its own function. Makes it easier to find things and, you know, keep your code from turning into spaghetti when you do that. But that's going to do it for me for today. I try to post about 2 game dev videos a week. I like to talk about the weirder things you can do in GameMaker, so if you like weird 3D shader things and whatever, feel free to subscribe. I have a Patreon, so if you want to contribute to the channel, links to that can be found in all the usual places. Otherwise, I hope you all found this useful, and I will see you all later. Special thanks to Army Armbuster, DJ Gibbles, Edward Holt, GameMaker, Harold Guidry, KXC, Manta Ray, Maddie Allen, Paul Anstey, Sindra Larson, Squarecrow, The Oz, Vitro V, and Zenjamin for supporting these videos. If you want to contribute to the channel, head on over to the Patreon page down in the video description to join the fun.